Folks are going back to school, your fall sports athletes. If a lot of you train football players, volleyball players, etc., they're heading into fall camp. And now all of a sudden, if you are just training football players, your gym might be looking a little bit empty.
And we were basically empty in the fall, and it was a long, slow, painful season. Just like with any change of season on the athlete front, there's multiple things that we want to make sure we're looking at.
What has happened, people? Welcome to the Gympire podcast. You're in the right place if you are a gym owner, fitness pro that is looking to grow your gym, grow your business in ways that you, your team, your community, your family, the people you serve, but not least importantly, your bank account are going to feel absolutely awesome about. I am here with the handsome devils, Mark Ennis and Connor Flayhouse. Today, folks, we are talking about basically the idea of how to get and keep more athlete clients. This is applicable probably to any special population, I guess, in theory, really any population in theory. But it is, as we're recording this, we're in August, heading into September. Folks are going back to school, your fall sports athletes. If a lot of you train football players, volleyball players, etc., they're heading into fall camp. And now all of a sudden, if you are just training football players, your gym might be looking a little bit empty. So we're going to have these guys who both own thriving seven-figure, in Mark's case, multiple seven-figure athlete training businesses. Connor's first location was and still is a seven-figure business that has a heavy athlete population. And my little tiny used to train athletes way back in the day, much less impressively than these folks. But we're going to dive into how to get and keep more athletes as you hit these really big waves of seasonal changes. If you train a bunch of baseball players, this will be helpful for you when you get into whatever it is, March and April or whatever, when people start to get into the big baseball season and so on and so forth. So who wants to go first? We'll let y'all arm wrestle for it.
I'll kick it off. Lead from the front. Lead from the front, as they say.
Kick it off.
No complacency.
Join us or watch us.
Thanks for saying and stealing all my trademarked taglines. Appreciate it, guys. All true, all part of our culture, though. Try to borrow our culture. Good luck. See what happens. As DR said, this is more of a change of season way of thinking. Right now, we're heading out of summer into the fall, kind of heading into back to school. So just like with any change of season on the athlete front, there's multiple things that we want to make sure we're looking at. Before I get more specific, I'll broadly do some broad strokes, then Connor can fill in. Maybe I'll then obviously jump back in and plus it for him. But broad strokes is look at the calendar, know what these specific dates and weeks are. It seems elementary, but it is very important. High school and youth sports have different dates typically. Know when people are taking vacation time. I'll know when practices start, fall sports start, all of that. So knowing just the dates and the planning needs to be step one. Step two, keep who you have. So it's a lot easier to keep who you have for a little bit through the fall rather than totally having to reload. And I've done both in certain years. We've done one really well and we had to reload before. And like GR said in the intro there, like I was also the guy that trained a lot of football players, and then we were basically empty in the fall. And it was a long, slow, painful season, so to speak. So know the calendar, keep who you have, and then we can start to get a little more tactical. Well, I guess the third one before I kick it over is I'm pulling a list to see who was with me last year, who's still an eligible client. So from the athlete front, they didn't graduate or stop playing sports or something like that you know of. I'm pulling that list and I'm just going to compare who we have right now, who's not with us, who was with us last fall that we need to kind of reactivate. So those are my big three right now: calendar and planning, keep who you have, and then reactivation lists. So my colleague Connor, you want to plus that at all?
Hold on. This is no. So this is like you saying, hey, keep who you have is like saying, hey, GR, like jump 40 inches and dunk on a tornado. You know what I mean? Like it's way easier said than done. So what are your best sort of tips for helping the struggling, or really helping any gym owner keep who you have?
Retention wise always goes back to like they have to enjoy what they're doing. Number one, the pain of leaving has to be there and they need to stick around and they want to stick around. Logistically, back in the day, right now, I say back in the day, now that we've expanded again, like we're a lot closer to our communities. So like sometimes just logistical, they can't make the session times they're offering once practice starts, which I would say that's under the planning portion, right? Your sessions and your session offerings have to line up with what's doable. That's basically just saying it has to work logistically. Then you need to have a great offer for them to keep training. They probably can't maintain the rigidity if you have a loose or a pretty tight system like we do with memberships and like that. we need to have a different offer for them to maybe it's a little more flexible that allows them to use it more often. And they're a lot more apt to maybe jump on that when they're still training, right? If you wait to them to leave for 3 weeks and then offer them that, you're not getting them. So having that offer to keep who you have is big, huge.
So I want to reiterate what, like, if you guys weren't listening or paying attention or listen on 2.5x speed, like I like to, hashtag ear mutants, like that point that Mark just made, which is absolutely gigantic. Don't wait until they're gone for 3 weeks to make this great offer, right? Make the offer before they've actually left to, give yourself a better chance of playing the game. So typically, and you don't have to get into specific numbers. So I hate to give specific price points and things like that on way public forums like this, because the reality for those of you listening, and if you listen to like our model episode where we talked about that, the reality is you could be priced, Mark could be priced perfectly appropriately, and he is, we know this, for his market, and completely inappropriately for where you're at. So without going into necessarily like specific numbers, or at least with the caveat of me saying, look, these are Mark's prices right now. They may not be appropriate for you. They may be too high, too low, whatever, depending on your individual situation, expense structure, et cetera, et cetera. How does your in-season or continuation or whatever you want to call it offer differ from what they're doing in the summertime?
Good question. We try to keep it really similar because people always compare with that. The value is we allow more flexibility. So like normally, for instance, like our memberships, they can't carry over sessions month to month, which is pretty common in our models like ours. Maybe this time they can use it regardless of whenever they want. We have an option for that, more like a session pack, or we can just downgrade their membership and frequency if they can hit it. But again, everything that we do is all prescription based. So we're having those conversations with them and trying to map their schedule out. So price per session, all that is really similar. And it's just a matter of, do you want to discount it a little bit? Fine. We charge a little bit more for it sometimes because when they come in for that in-season session, it's probably a little bit more customized. So it just kind of test it out and see what works for you and your clientele.
I like it. I like it. I think I've grilled you a lot. Connor, what you got?
Just of course plussing Mark, but just kidding. I totally agree with everything that he said. I think another way to look at it is that you need to start early, like Mark said, but I look at it as a kind of a two-way approach. Is our coaches we communicate with our coaches quite a bit of how to communicate with the athletes themselves, of making it a big deal to continue to train during the season and to communicate that, hey, this is the way that we do it and that you should do it. So getting on the communication with the athletes themselves very early on in the process, or not leaving and waiting to the last minute, is important. And then also to start communicating with your email list, so your parents of those athletes, to start pushing for in-season training into that transition from the off season to the quote unquote maintenance of everything they did in the off season, to start going to just like Mark, we've done it a couple different ways where we'll do like an in-season package. So it's basically a session pack for 3 months or however long that season is, or we'll just downgrade them to like a 5 time a month or like a 1 time a week option, just to keep them retained in our ecosystem.
Like it. How heavy do you guys lean into the education, right? Because the reality is when I used to talk with a very minuscule amount of parents in comparison to you guys, right? It's very much like, look, we're going to have your kid absolutely prepared to be a complete beast in August. But the reality is, if they're a beast in August and they're a complete in November, when playoff season comes around, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? You end up a scrub. And so how much are y'all leaning into the education process in terms of how important in-season training is and things of that nature? Maybe injury prevention, maybe prehab, rehab stuff. What's that look like? Recovery, et cetera.
We used to do a lot more of that, and we kind of went away from it. Not just because it wasn't a direct correlation. We didn't really see, but I think it all comes down to logistical. Like, can they make it or not? They know training's important. It's a fine line between like begging them to stay or trying to make them feel guilty for leaving. Yeah. So again, if the kid's 5, if he's, us underclassmen and maybe not playing that much, or they play on Thursdays, or up here, our freshmen and JV play on Thursdays, and you're not playing very much and you have bigger goals, like you probably should train once a week, like at minimum. And you live 5 minutes away, all right, you should do that. If you live half hour away and you're playing this, but you're also then probably doing maybe you're doing some travel baseball stuff on Sundays and doing some of that too, which happens with our kids. Like, maybe not going to push it as much, so trying to shove some education down their throat in that scenario. It's just kind of like, yeah, we get it, but we were busy and we just spent the last 6 months with you. So we kind of just, it's definitely important. I think communicating to the specific athlete themselves, like Connor said, is big, just to kind of gauge their goals, but not everyone has the same goals. So that's why mass emailing or mass communicating in that regard, we kind of went away from that and keep it more specific to the individual.
Which I guess you guys are customizing. Go ahead, Connor.
I agree with Mark. I think it's all dependent. I think with club sports, it's where it's a little like crazier schedule. It's obviously going to be rely way more on logistics and actually having the time to do it. That's where I think Mark touched upon having your schedule ahead of time be built out to accommodate for that. So maybe some later times in the evening meant for the in-season athletes. But I think if it's a high school athletes where it's a little bit more structured, like, hey, practice after school, game on weekend, or game maybe like Tuesday, Friday, I tend to go a little bit more into the education of that to understand, like, hey, we want to continue to train. Like, your season is 12 weeks long. That's 12 training opportunities that you can continue to build towards the off season. So if it's more of like a prototypical high school athlete where their season is a little bit more structured, we're going to lean more into the education of it, especially with the older athlete where they're able to drive themselves. If it's a middle school athlete, you can educate the hell out of them. It really doesn't matter if it's impossible for them to get here and possible for their parent to get here. There's really not much you can do. I saw it really is dependent on the athlete and also the sport. Like Mark brought up baseball. I'm in Chicago. Baseball is obviously a spring sport, but in Chicago, it doesn't really get nice until April. So the amount of rainouts and schedule conflicts that those athletes deal with, they could have all the best intentions in the world to continue to train in season, but it's just a logistical nightmare. So I think the biggest thing you have to keep in mind is to plan ahead for it, right? Do whatever you need to do to educate them, to communicate it, to make it a big deal, to say, hey, this is how we do it, to try to get ahead of it, to retain as many people as you can. But at the end of the day, I think Mark is absolutely right, where logistics and just, is it possible for them to continue to train is going to be the biggest thing.
Yeah. One more psychological tip for these gym owners as well. I know I had to do this. You will lose people. You will not keep everybody. If people leave, it's expected. Just expect it. Don't think about all the stuff we did for them and I can't believe they're leaving. Don't they know they're gonna, like, they need to keep training, or man, I need this. And then you think business wise, like, man, I'm gonna reload this. Oh, that's a lot of money walking out the door. And some years you just miss it, and you got to learn from that immediately and change it for next year or the next season change. But expect it, and you can't get in, or you have to kind of go back on offense. There's a mode to play defense with this, but then you have to go on offense and just expect to have to reload a little bit. That's the business you're in when you're training athletes. And if you're going to dwell on it so much, then don't train athletes and stop doing something that's going to have to reload it 4 times a year. Like, what do you expect, right? And I'm glad people, hey, guess what? I'm glad when my competition freaks out, because we don't, and we can use it as a good opportunity. And GR, I have 4 more tips here.
Oh, 4.
But I'm not telling them because I already gave enough on this for this podcast.
Oh my gosh.
So we're saving it. We're saving it.
You know what? Hey,
I don't know, GR. Don't we have maybe something a little, in the future where if you really want all the tips, then maybe you, I don't know. We'll see.
Weird.
I'm of the philosophy, just like give the shit away, and if they want to actually work,
I totally agree. I have an abundance mindset. GR Mark is. I will talk. He said going on offense, right? So right now we are in August. We're going to be headed in September. So you may have just lost all your fall sport athletes and you are probably freaking out. Like, what the hell am I going to do? Now would be a good time to transition and focus on those winter sport athletes. A good way to do that is, we just gave you a bunch of tips for retaining athletes, but now let's go on offense. Mark's shaking his head because he's afraid to give away the goods, but I'm not. I got your guys back. I would start some sort of winter sport, maybe a 12-week or 8-week camp of some sorts. a specialized program just for them. Your winter sports are probably going to be your girls and boys high school basketball. So maybe buzzword up right here, like a vertical jump injection camp. That would be a great option for you to do. Maybe get like,
how about ACL injury prevention camp?
yeah, good extension right there, my man. Good extension. You're working on it. Get it.
I'm a week out.
If you can't see, JR is showing us his really
So,
newly constructed ACL.
Oh, I figured they would be able to see that now. It just sounds weird.
constructed.
There you can go. So maybe you can have separate programs, separate price point for that, but get like focus on getting 12 to 15 athletes in that. And now you don't feel those athletes walking out the door into their fall sport as much. So like Mark said, you got to defend for what you have and try to retain all those athletes. But then you also have to realize like, hey, no matter what you do, you need some offense. So now you got to flip to what's ahead and start planning for that next season.
Love it. I love it.
All right, I'll share one. Then.
There we go.
Do it. There we go.
Oh, we're going.
Well, I don't want this. I mean, we can't turn this into, an hour-long thing potentially.
That's true.
Or more. And quite frankly, when you get too many stuff, you got to act. I'm a big action guy. So,
that's true.
Stuff. We talk about the big stuff first, the more the principles, like no matter what, you got to do the things that we talked about, with planning ahead, keeping who you have, and then reactivation.
Oh no. Mark's internet is he just gave the tip. We just planned this out. We planned this out, everyone. Yeah, Mark's frozen. Mark's tips are
going.
Mark, you're frozen.
Am I good? I'm good
now.
now.
You're
good now.
I'm good now, right? All right.
Dude, was that on purpose? You pretended like you're gonna give the goods and then you hit the frozen. Oh,
all
sorry,
right.
I can't hit you.
I'll break it back. I'll say again. So going on offense, and you know how I like to look at the capacity, and basically, good defense is a great offense in this situation too.
Yeah.
We get so fat in the summer. Like I know we expand our summer schedules. I'm sure most people will do, especially on the athlete side. Don't wait those 2, 3, 4 weeks to re-look at your schedule. If you start losing people through the door, or those athletes are downgrading, or they're not coming as frequently, you're going to be fat in your session offerings. We need to whittle that down the best we can and conserve payroll or reallocate those payroll hours. And hopefully you got enough staff. This is a totally another topic of having your staff able to go help you on offense. Hey, we're going to get you off the coaching floor. We're going to go reload. These are the tactics we're going to go run and run some plays like Connor was saying. So it's like, you're not just going to cut staff hours, but you're definitely cutting coaching hours and reducing that schedule to help with your season change as well, because you just have to plan. Like, it's not a season. And if you're an athlete business, you just have to plan that August isn't going to be the best month out of the year for you, or really any of those season changes. So just expect it.
Gosh dang. All right. Now I think we did give them some great stuff, and for the purpose of time and trying to get you guys some more great stuff on time, we'll go ahead and cut it and just move into sort of rehashing things here. But to recap the tips, Mark's giant tip number 1 was look at the calendar and prepare. I think that cannot be stated enough, right? The reality is, if you're just now looking at this, by the time you listen to this show, it may very well be too late, realistically. So maybe don't make that mistake for the ensuing seasons. And it is infinitely more important for you guys if you're working with athletes, which we know is a seasonal population. It's infinitely more important if you work with a seasonal type population that you need to look at the calendar ahead of time and know when those lulls and kind of the ebbs and flows of your business are likely to occur based on, where your seasons, sit. And I know they happen different and kind of somewhat differently in different regions, depending on where you're at. Number 2, keep who you have. So play that defense. Number 1, the first tip you gave, Mark, was just good advice, good retention advice, regardless of the population, right? They've got to enjoy what they're doing in terms of training with you. Otherwise, they're just looking for an excuse to get out. But if they love it and power strength or flay hives or whatever it is the best part of their day every day, like they're going to try to find a way to continue to keep that as a part of their child's life as they continue through whatever the season is. Thing number 2, logistical. Again, this just goes into preparation. Thing number 3, having a great offer for them and making sure that offer happens ahead of time and that we're not waiting until 3 weeks after the fact, your gym is empty, and begging everybody. You mentioned number 3, pulling the list from last year and then seeing if you can hit some reactivation offers to folks on that list. Connor maybe had a couple of tips, in there too, that I think were fine. Connor went on offense for you on going at the what's the next let's say sport maybe, or sport or league or whatever it is, that's got that kind of urgency, oh, I need to get ready for the season. What's going on? Like, let's go make this happen, and putting together maybe a camp for them, a vertical jump camp, an ACL injury prevention camp, so on and so forth. And there's some great tips on that front. The thing where maybe we disagreed a little bit, and I get to be the last word. So you guys, is I think with Mark and Connor, they've been in this business long enough, and they work so closely with every athlete, even before they were in business for ages, that a lot of that education and communication on, hey, it's kind of important to train during the season, is probably happening organically during sessions, during those everyday conversations that you're having with athletes, where it's not like, hey, the week before you're about to report to camp, we're hammering you guys with videos on the fact that it's important to train in season. No, I'm not saying do that, but I do think you're probably doing yourself a disservice, particularly if you're less established, right, than either one of these guys, to not utilize things like social media and your email list during the middle of the summer, during different times of the year, not just when it's urgent right before the time they're going to report, to hit on some of the ideas that are just they're just very easy, I think, concepts for parents and athletes to grasp. Like, if your season is 12 weeks and you don't train and all you do is run your body into the ground for 12 weeks, your first, insert 4, 6, 12 weeks back into your athletic performance program, whatever you want to call it, is just catching up on the ground you lost. Whereas if you compare that with the athlete that was able to maintain their status throughout that 12 weeks, they're starting 12 weeks ahead of you. Over the course of an athletic career, they are absolutely kicking your kids, right? If you don't make in-season training a priority in this example. So I think there's a lot to be gleaned from attempting to educate your clientele, particularly if you're not doing that organically. Like, I know when I was still doing all the coaching, like, those conversations happen all the time with our kids, and they probably happen with Connor, Mark, your coaches, because y'all are working in such small groups. There's so much connection and give a shit and whatnot with the athletes. So a lot of that's probably happening organically. And if that's not the case in your facility, if you're more of almost a boot camp style athletic performance outfit, then maybe you need to do more education, because you're not able to connect with each kid individually as much. So with that said, hey guys, I think that's a wrap, right? So how to keep your clients and make the most out of seasonal changes without completely killing your business and hating your life. And I think we hit on what should be a future episode, which is how to deal with it when your clients leave, what to do when your clients leave, the mindset to take, what to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So look out for that episode coming soon. Love, hugs. Adios.